Alan, I want to talk to you at the break.
Okay.
Hey, how's everybody today? Good, yay, all right. All right, so I think by now that you all know that the first thing I'm going to say is turn off your phones, okay? So please turn off your phones. We got very little to talk about today also, so we're going to start right in with Wisdom Wednesday. That's tomorrow right here on this stage. We are going to have that from 2:30 to 4, and it will be Alabama Rural Ministries with Lisa Pierce. So it sounds like really should be a lot of fun, I guess. So don't really know much about it, but it'd be a good chance to learn. So, well, like I said, I'm going to make this short and sweet because, quite honestly, I made everybody run overtime last week, so I'm not going to do that today. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you today the High Priest of History, Historifex Maximus. Hail, Kicklighter!
Thank you, thank you. I am shocked and, yes, mortified to know that I went over. I feel bad, ashamed. I beg your forgiveness, but I had to finish those Julio Claudians. I just had to, because Nero was just not a nice person, and he needed to go. So he's gone. As we start off with the family that replaced them. Now, the Julio Claudians are few in number, but very confusing in terms of their reigns. However, the end of this group, I think we could say, is no loss to anybody. The future belongs to people who are called Flavians, after the name of the founder of the new dynasty. And there he is. His name is Vespasian. Beautiful statue, looks very majestic in a toga, and he was a great general. You say, what is his height? Well, like the Chinese would say, he had the mandate of heaven, following what was called the year of 4 emperors, meaning that there were 4 who claimed to be emperor, and after the other 3 were killed, he said, well, I guess I'm the last. I survived, and I am the ruler. And that's the truth. Each one had power for a while, and it sort of gives you a pretty obvious hint as to how things are going to go in the future. But once Vespasian gets this, then he is well established, and a very successful general he was. He'd had a brilliant career, but again, what good is a career if another general's army defeats yours, right? So he just happens to be the survivor of the 4. Now, he almost brought his career to a halt, and I feel I need to tell you what he did. This had to do with the Emperor Nero. Nero, as you may know, was a great star of music and the fine arts. And Nero enjoyed having large audiences. But one thing Nero did not like was for someone to go to sleep while he was talking. Yeah. And this created in Nero a sense of strong dislike. And what do? when you dislike someone, you execute them. Luckily, Vespasian, who fell asleep during an Neronian performance, was spared. That's right. I mean, it's amazing. He lived to become emperor after falling asleep. I mean, the poor man worked hard. I mean, it's tough being a great general, I'm sure. So you understand people have to rest sometime, but not during Nero's performance. In any event, Vespasian was particularly famous, as we're going to see, for his military successes in the Mideast. But he had also been along the German front and elsewhere. So he's a very, very successful general, and his name leads to the Flavian dynasty, Vespasian Flavius, if you will. And he and his two sons constitute what we call the Flavian dynasty. You can see that it is not a long period, just himself and his two sons, and that wraps it up. You will notice that he is not, in terms of social, part of the highest level, not even a Roman, but he's an Italian. And you might say, well, that's almost as good. Not to the Romans it wasn't. They are real peculiar that way, I think. We are the true heirs to the throne. Italian equestrian, upper middle class, lower upper class. I don't know what you would call these folks, but they are high up. The knights, and they are high up. You know, it's sort of like being a big deal in a little place, a smaller community or something like that. But shoot, we've got the army, so that's the main thing. The reason this is often mentioned is to let you know the world has changed. And now someone who is, shall we say, provincial equestrian is now the emperor, and I don't think people are going to say, well, I don't know about your background. I think, you know, he's got the army, and so he is now in charge. His efforts in, as I say, the campaign in Palestine will be one of his great successes. And we will turn to the Jews at a later time. This is a very interesting part of Roman history and one of the great campaigns, I think, of this particular period. And of course, we have yet another historian to turn to, because Josephus, as he was named, and you can see his dates up there, 37 to 100, was, in fact, the individual that one has to read in this particular area, because clearly as a Jew himself and as a native of Palestine, and as a great writer, he becomes the basic source of information. Because the others we talked about, like Tacitus and Suetonius, they mention it, but it's not as major an issue as it will be for Josephus himself. You will notice by what I said that he ends up betraying the Jews personally. He had been in the campaign fighting against Romans, and then he'll switch sides. He will find it comfortable, as you can understand then, afterwards, to move to Rome rather than to continue living in Palestine, where I think he would probably get some ugly notes or some, people saying ugly things when you're shopping and things. So he moved to Rome where he continued his work. He may have been a code, but he told it as he saw it. And Josephus is definitely going to be our major source for this period. So that's the big name here. And you'll notice his dates, so he doesn't go past this. He just fits in to this particular period and the story that he will tell. He's all about the first century. This work gives us a lot of information on Vespasian and his activities in Palestine. And understand that Vespasian was in Palestine, and then this whole Nero thing came up, and I wonder if maybe some of Vespasian's handlers or advisors said, you probably need to get up there and check this out and take a break from the Palestinian. Go up there because this may be the calling for you. Who knows? But it's certainly true that he had his son Titus there to take over the military command. In other words, Vespasian wasn't indispensable. I mean, great and all that. But Titus will now be the man. As the wars in Palestine are not going to go... I mean, it's not like the Jews are suddenly going to say, oh, Nero's dead, well, let's not fight anymore. No. I mean, it's just like news flash, and let's get back to our rebellion. Yes, it's no doubt about it. The Jews gave the Romans quite a few headaches. This whole period of the first century and continuing will be a major period of problems. And the Romans may well be sorry that they hold or tried to hold Palestine, because they never let up on the Roman authorities. This is a bust of Titus himself, who's a very interesting figure. We're just talking about the Kennedy period. Actually, Titus is another one of those figures who died 40, 41, so we'll never know all that he would have done. Here's another interesting statue of him. He succeeded his father. He had taken over command of the forces, and he had some particular disease that brought his life to an end. But those years are very important, and I know many of you who've been to Italy will be aware of what happened in 79 and are aware of the ruins of Pompeii and all of that. Yeah? So, that's sort of like Herbert Hoover, isn't it? Getting the depression your first year in office. I mean, that's kind of what happened to him in 79. He just has all of that. But he was well regarded for helping to set up a lot of relief programs for the people of those cities that had been affected. So there's some good things we can say about Titus. On the other hand, there's some other interesting things we could say about Titus, one of which, during his time in Palestine, he was supposed to be involved in a liaison with, of all things, a Jewish princess. This is the most fascinating story, and I always used to tell the students, pull out that King James when you check into the motel and look at the 32nd chapter of the book of Acts, because you'll find references to a Jewish princess. She was the sister of Herod Agrippa, who was a Jewish king. Of course, a puppet of the Romans. And you think, you mean they might have been in a relationship? Yes. And she say, oh, can this be right? And yet it's so wrong. But it's like, isn't that wild though to think, about a Roman emperor and a Jewish princess? I mean, Harlequins are made for this, aren't they? Yeah, I think you could get a whole book out of this. But yes, she is a real person, and did end up coming to Rome for a while, but that's why I use that word liaison, because it was nothing permanent. But of course, rumors passed down in the history books. He would be succeeded by his younger brother, Domitian, who, as you see, ruled for a very long time. Domitian's reputation is significantly affected by the historians who view, contemporary historians, who view him rather negatively because of what they always assume was paranoia. I think if the Pfizer folks or somebody were there back then, maybe a lot of these people would have been better. But yeah, he was, I mean, I'm sure there were plots going on around him, people trying to do away with him, but I think he took it to extremes. As a matter of fact, after Nero's persecutions, you remember, because of the fires in Rome, Domitian will be the second of the emperors responsible for persecutions of Christians. And why was he persecuting them? Probably some idea of Jews and Christians being involved in some sort of anti-Roman conspiracy, whatever it may be. He had some reason to be fearful. The senators may not have liked it. As I say, Domitian really has a bad historical reputation, even though there's not a lot specific to say, which I find to be extremely interesting when you think about what are you holding on to here. You're holding on to these Roman historians like Suetonius or Tacitus, who are not particular fans. That said, the campaigns in Britain went on. But then we ask ourselves, you remember Tacitus' father-in-law, some of you all, Agricola? Agricola was recalled under Domitian. And, you know, that could upset the family. You think they all get together and they celebrate and say, yeah, I got recalled, but you were doing such a great job, Dad. And then you say, well, maybe, I guess not everybody agreed, and I guess I'll get my pension. I certainly hope so. I mean, oh, Dad, this is so hurtful. Yeah, you know, I think I'll go write another history chapter. Yeah, think about it, yeah. And you know they don't like it because Domitian hurt Agricola. And you think, fair and balanced. I'm not so sure. I'm thinking Tacitus probably didn't have it exactly positive about Domitian. In any event, what happened to Domitian? Well, I think the police call it foul play. It may have been the Praetorian Guard working with the Senate, as in he needs to be rubbed out. It's just, you know, he's had his time. Now, what did the French say? Look for the woman. Sometimes maybe there was one, and this may be the case. Look at this painting. Guess where you can find it? Baltimore, Maryland. Would you believe it? It's so interesting, isn't it? We just never know who's going to get these artworks. Now, you notice the date. It was a British painting, but it ended up there. So if you go to the Baltimore Museum of Art, don't miss it. But, wow, who all's in it? Well, leading the way is Vespasian. Pontifex Maximus, mind you. High priest, we're having a big ceremony, big do. So the emperor, of course, is going to be at the front. Who's in the back? Well, look who's got his head covered. Don't they call those hoodies? That's all that is Titus. So that's what they mean by the triumph of Titus. And you say, well, who's the cute couple in front? Okay, that's Domitian and Domitia. Yeah, she's Domitian's wife. And then look, I'm going to kind of lean over here. What she's doing right here, she's giving them the look. Yeah, hey, Big T. Hey, big brother. And you say, should she be? Is this a sense of caring about a family member? I don't think so. Could there have been? Maybe so. And the sources tell us this sort of stuff. I mean, it's really like, the Post or the Daily News is just full of this kind of, the back page, everything that's lurid, we've got it. So the idea is that Titus might have been involved in a relationship with his brother's wife, and that finally the younger brother acted against his older brother, and eventually Domitia acted against Domitian. So there are lots of versions to this lurid family saga, but enough has been said that we can say goodbye to the Flavians and understand that their years of rule in Rome and their domestic issues should not blind us to the fact that the Pax Romana is alive and well. It's sometimes we do get so caught up in these issues of the family. But I just thought this painting was just too much. And obviously the British painter was quite captivated with this story, because when you are close up, you can see those eyes. And those eyes are not in a fraternal way, not a way that a nice, people should be looking at each other. Because this is a religious ceremony, so they should be honoring the gods. Because look at Big Daddy up there at the front, how Vespasian's looking very high. But now, the greatest time human beings have lived. That's right. You didn't make it, did you? Sorry about that. But those years, and that term, the age of the 5 good emperors, is what everyone has known this as for a long time. 96 to 180, how can we date it so quickly? Well, Domitian dies in 96. Let the good times roll. And why 180? Well, the last of the 5 good emperors dies. So, we've got our dates. What is said is that after the Julio-Claudians and the Flavians, the powers that be, decided they had to find a way for one emperor to come after another without lots of folks getting killed. So how are we going to do that? Well, the Judeo-Claudians tried it by blood relations. Then the Flavians tried it by family. 2 strikes. So, let's go number 3. And that's the method of adoption. Not adoption like, wonderful families taking a little child. This has to do with an emperor, sort of maybe interviews, talent concert, Rome's best, and then he notices someone that he says, wow, this is really a fine young man, great resume, he interviewed nicely, we felt really simpatico, the whole thing. I think I'm going to adopt him. So what does he become? Well, he becomes sort of like junior emperor, sort of like emperor-to-be. And I don't think he'll say dad or anything like that. I think she's still emperor, great one, etc. But you learn on the job training. And if and when, oh sadness, something happens to dad, you're emperor. And guess what you do? You choose somebody to be your little boy. That method of adoption, then, is what they now pick up. And that is exactly what's going to happen in the age of the 5 good emperors. And you wonder how long it lasted? For 5 emperors, right? How do they say it? It seemed like a good idea at the time. And it did last a while. 96 to 180, for goodness sakes. As far as we here, within reason, I don't want to go to extremes, I'm not saying they're all saints, but they do seem to have been good emperors. And that's as much as anyone can ask, I suppose. The idea being then that if that idea is right, that this was the happiest time that human beings have lived upon the earth, you think, I wonder if we could bring back and talk to all those folks and say, yeah, boy, you're losers now in that 21st century. You can't imagine how great it was. Yeah, I think being a slave in the provinces, I could imagine. I can't imagine this was the best time to live. I don't think this included everybody. I think when we are talking about a very small minority of people who, yes, may have enjoyed all of the benefits of Roman civilization. I'll give you that. But let's not include everybody, because it excludes a lot of folks, doesn't it? I think that's obvious. Here are names, and you can tell Nerva, who had been a special assistant of Domitian, who had some years on him, he now became ruler, and he was just a transitional figure. I figured they knew that he wasn't going to last long. I don't mean, just he was not there for the long time. And then, of course, the ones that if you went out, people who know some Roman history, they would have heard of Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius. I don't know if people would know that name. I would doubt it. But then finally, of course, Marcus Aurelius, whom everyone knows, both because of Roman history and philosophy and movies. More of that later. But these rulers and their reigns do indicate an extraordinary situation. And extraordinary in the sense that in 180, when this comes to an end, people will say, you know, we have a lot of problems. We're really troubled. But, you know, it did last a long time when you stop and think about it. However, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's note simply that most of them had very long reigns, meaning that they enjoyed the benefits, presumably, of security. I mean, they weren't worried about being killed or assassinated. They all died natural deaths. In a famous movie called The Gladiator, there is a suggestion of foul play of Marcus Aurelius. I remember just being infuriated when I saw the film. I said, that's not true, but hey, again, I'm not a shareholder in the film industry, so I have no right to speak. I think they did very well by telling historical untruths. That's okay. I've gotten past it. Nerva just held the throne, and again, Nerva's that transition from Domitian. But then we get to the big time, and that's Trajan. Trajan is one of the great figures of Roman history, in my opinion. And we're going to look at a map soon enough. He sort of rounds things out. This is as far as the Romans ever get. And it's plenty if you think about Mesopotamia, Armenia, and Romania. If you ever go to Romania, maybe you've been to Romania, it's an interesting country, and I wonder sometimes if the folks know Dacia. It was called as a Roman province. And I think if you get out and ask Romanians, are you aware of your Roman heritage, or did you take Latin when you were in school, and think about how similar your language is to Latin? Before you were asked to leave, I think you could learn some interesting things, teach the Romanians quite a few things, because I'm not altogether sure that they appreciate that. But he kept pushing the Parthians back east, that is Trajan, and it worked for him. He spent most of his reign in military conquest, and you say, well, isn't that expensive? Yeah, but it puts a lot of people to work. Yeah, a lot of, unemployment issues, not so much. Join the army. The military then is going to be very busy. You say, well, I thought we were in the Pax Romana. Well, we are, but we are peacekeeping by expanding, okay? And by expanding, we prevent war. Yeah, you have to think about that a while. Maybe in your break you can do that. You can think about how this is a peace when there's always war. But in fact, there is. In addition, the policy of bread and circuses. If you've ever heard that term before, it comes from a writer in the days of Nero, someone who was a satirist, a misogynist, an individual who had a lot of, I think, he must have been a troubled individual. His name was Juvenal, Juvenal, one of the most famous of Augustan writers. And as such, he will write a lot about contemporary Roman society. For example, there was quite a bit on people, and notice the difference. We call freedmen. I don't know if you caught it. I'm going to make sure you did. Not Freeman, but freedman. A freedman is a person who has been liberated. He is an individual who had been a slave, and he might have been so good, or for whatever other reason, the owner decides to manumit him. These freedmen then, on occasion, as former slaves did in the United States, I suppose, went on to enjoy great success. Juvenal wrote a work called Petronius Satiricon. Some of you Latin students may have read it. And it basically is a satire about, I guess, people that we call, I'm trying to throw around languages now, the nouveau riche. People who've just gotten money and now they're living big. But they're living big because they don't know how to spend money. A friend of mine, Elizabeth Pickering, who came from Texas, told me about what was the store out in Texas. It's still the Neiman Marcus. And they actually put out a directory for people who had gotten money so they would know how to spend it. And you say, I know, it's troubling. It really is. I don't know how to spend money. And you think, well, if you are not used to it, but you're like a freedman, and you learn, well, that's kind of gauche. You can't go there and shop. You know, that's not for people of status. Well, that's the Rome of Juvenal's day. And you say, well, so he really cared about the underclass. Not really. He ridiculed them, particularly anyone who was female. But in the case of bread and circuses, this is to do with the masses of people. And that's why we call it bread and circuses. Feed them and entertain them, and then they won't be trouble. If they're not fed, if they're not entertained, you say, well, maybe you could set up an employment center and they can get new jobs. I don't think they were thinking that way. I don't think they were interested in those kinds of issues. That's why we have slaves to work. So these free folks who haven't got anything, they get the bread and the circuses because you love your animal versus your human, and they can scream and holler and then hit the streets and feed them regular times. That is the idea. And again, that's going on certainly by the period of the 5 good emperors. And I would not be surprised if it were not going on much earlier. Because you've got to do that for the masses of people. Because they don't have all the entertainment, shall we call it, of today. There's so many ways we can waste time now. But back then, the thought of that, the human versus the animal, a real turn on. I mean, really exciting. That's enough to help you sleep that night. Think, I was really great. I wonder what they'll do next. The entertainment. It's always bread and circuses. I promised you a map, and here's how you're going to get it. The additions don't seem large until you think about the fact that the Roman Empire is already so huge that now, you see Romania up there? They're in, I think it's, what would you call it? Dark pink, maybe? But it's up there, and you see the area of Iraq. All of these, you see a little bit of North Africa. These areas will be essentially the last acquired by the Romans, and it does not mean that everybody's holding out a welcome Rome sign, because there will be many who will be opposed. Most of it, other than Romania, what we call Romania, will not survive as Roman. But I thought the map would just let you know how far the Romans got. And remember, if you are a growing empire, you got to grow. You can't just say, have a nice empire, let's just keep it all and just love on it. You know, you can't do that. You got to have growth. I mean, what are your peacekeepers going to do if we don't have a war? I mean, come on. Give me some action. And, of course, lest we forget, the British Isles. Those darn Gaels up in what is Scotland today. We keep on pushing that way during the period of Trajan. So all of this is to indicate that the era of the 5 good emperors did not mean there won't be military casualties. They will continue on. But the Roman Empire is hanging on, thank you very much, and in general, doing very well. Does that include the ordinary Joe and Jane Roman? I'm not so sure. The bread and circuses are nice, but I would hardly think that if we were interested in the middle class life that many of us aspire to, most are far from possessing that. So that's Trajan, a very interesting and significant ruler, if you ask me. Now, he adopted Hadrian. And again, Hadrian is one of the greatest of the 5. But of course, if I went out on the streets, which I do on occasion, and I asked people, what do you think of when you think of the 5 good emperors? Somebody will look at me and say, get away from me, mister, you know, I'm calling the cops. But yes, life is not a Roman history quiz, right? But in fact, Hadrian's Wall, we all know Hadrian's Wall. And we often think, why did Hadrian have this wall built? Well, it's clear that it's a wonderful public works project, right? So, yeah, I'm thinking we give people something to do, but there's far more to it than that. I think it's Hadrian's way of saying, Trajan, I loved you, Big Daddy, but we got to put this to bed. We just have more than we can handle. That's why I speak of abandoning so much that Trajan had done. Remember, you as emperor, as a pope said once, my word is more important than hundreds of popes in the past because I'm living and they're not. That's simple. It is that simple. And so Hadrian, as emperor, is now in a position to say, those were wonderful things. I'm glad Trajan did them. But now, that's over because I'm emperor. And what he will do, in essence, is remove Romans from areas like Mesopotamia. They just had more, Mesopotamia, Iraq. Basically, they had done more than they could maintain. The same thing with building Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian decided, this back and forth, up and down. Let's just say, hi, folks in the north. This is where our land is, and that's your land. and we wave and hello and so forth. But let's just understand that this is where we are. Is it going to be an area where they can attack people? I don't think so. I think more it was just an area to say, this is where our territory ends. And y'all, good luck with your lands. If you've been up there, they need a lot of luck, don't they? Yeah. But it's more or less to understand that Hadrian, who was, in the best sense of the word, cosmopolitan, went all over this empire. And he seems to have been very interested in determining what the empire could be maintained and what they had to let go. More about Hadrian's Wall later, but I also want to note one of those sites that everyone who goes to Rome enjoys seeing, and of course, that is the great Pantheon. Now, I know if you've been to Rome recently, you've heard what the tourist guides always tell you, but for those who may have missed this, it was originally constructed by, well, I would call him one of Caesar Augustus' closest friends. And he was actually Caesar's son-in-law. Do you remember Julia, who was that troubling daughter? Well, this is one of her husbands. I think number 2. And you think, well, how did they end up? Well, Daddy's best friend. What could go wrong there? But yeah, she had children by him, and I'm sure that pleased her father very much. In any event, he may have been responsible, Agrippa was his name, for the Pantheon, but it would later burn down. However, the one that today exists came about at the time of Hadrian. Now, here is the person I so love and admire. Others take a different position. I challenge you, though. Maybe a slow weekend. You'll want to pull out all 6 volumes. Yes. Don't get the abridged. Don't cheat yourself that way. When you could do the whole thing, entire and uncut, unexpurgated. You could even get the illustrated version. There are people who have to have pictures. Yeah, you can get that. Or maybe it's online. I don't know. There's so many ways that Gibbon can come out and be part of our lives. And just look at him. Wouldn't you want to be Gibbon? I know that's not really his hair, but isn't it a nice wig? Yeah, maybe not. But we'll put in something with a cosmetologist. So get a request. Just as I have you all excited about Gibbon fever I can sense is out there. You are now entitled 5 minutes. Okay? You head for those restrooms.
I love everything what you do. Tell me, the Colosseum, was it built because of this circus kind of thing? I mean, the entertainment?
Oh, absolutely. Because the business was absolutely amazing when you think of, you've got all the gladiators and the animals from all over the empire.
Yeah. But was it built at the same time in the Pantheon or something like this?
Yes. It's in this.
Let's see, that's what I was wondering.
Oh, first and second.
should be get ready for the reception.
David is.
Getting your tax return.
I'm very excited.
Okay. So we know the Jews, those pesky Jews were forever causing problems. Did other people cause any problems too? The Spaniards, Gaul, Germany,
This is the only group not yet. And yeah, no, they're unique.
they were the peskies.
And don't forget, and so you've got the tension of so you've got tension. Are you found that surprising?
Yeah.
Part of it has to do there's some purity. God is the right God.
But the Spaniards,
I mean, they're troubling, but not in the same way.
I just think that's interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. Oh, I mean, yeah, they're pretty about the rebellion. Don't think they're everybody.
Yeah.
It's just something particular about the Jews. I don't know. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Okay, that's gone. There are Jews that are going in line. Look at Josie. Everything Jews have
I was just reading an Acts about you are a little
Okay. This is his kid sisters. Okay. So she'll be around. That's watch out.
Yeah, but I mean, of the
Oh, our people.
people
Yeah,
who are here in the
yeah, this is it. The end of it. Yeah. But yeah, it's yeah, you're all in contact. I think Wayne's retired.
oh yeah.
Technology. Loves classical. I'm surprised he never wanted to teach it. Because I asked him, John, because I would have before COVID.
Oh yeah.
I asked him. Well, we have a whole program in the history of technology and industrialization. And yes, that's part of it. But he goes back. Yeah. Medieval technology, you come in and want to talk about medieval warfare and how people use various devices. Yeah. Because I was making the say too, I've always managed the technology out there. They would straighten me out. Yeah, knowing every civilization had technology. Yeah, you just don't think about it. That they always had devices to show that we think about it. And that period of technology Industrial Revolution, though, boy, oh boy, that's a very, very interesting.
And along with that, Sam and
Tilden. I'm so impressed. Well, I know, but that you still, I'm just in awe. You remember 1876 and the presidential election? Yes. The Electoral College? You just keep on. I'm just in awe. This is just, well, don't you just, and Gibbon, how could you not love him? Just like a big old teddy bear. Or not. Very. Very British. Am I ready? But are they ready for me? Yes. Here they come. Okay, they're ready. Because I quietly said 1776, and then you came a-running, because that's the kind of year that does tend to excite a crowd. And you're thinking, why would we be excited? Because of the first publication of The Decline and Fall of the Roman. Ha ha, fooled you. Ha ha, thinking something else, weren't you? Yeah, you can't trust people. 1776, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. But if you don't want history and you don't want liberty, you could also go economy, the wealth of nations. It was a big year for famous things, 1776. You see his dates, 1737 to 1794, his epic work that maybe this weekend you can work on, 6 volumes, and you look at all the years you've got to get through, okay? You go 96 to 1590, yeah. So you're going like, can I do that in a quickie way? What were those yellow things that people, yes, loathsome, rated X, trash, yes. They would, but these, if you got volumes 5 and 6, you would have to go through Constantinople, whatever happened to the Byzantines, on and on and on. So, let me assure you that if after volume 3 or so you think, this has been real, but I need to let it go, it's entirely understandable. But for Gibbon, the question of Rome's end fascinated him, I guess, as much as its beginning. And experts I have read tell me that regardless of all the historians who have written on this subject, and Lord knows there are a lot of them, his is still considered one of the great works of both literature and history. Now, this is not to say that it is easy reading, okay? And the idea is entirely reprehensible of you on a sofa laying down with a volume of Gibbon. That is downright well, it's just evil, it's wicked, because it could lead to sloth, or, you know, you don't want to do it. You'd be so ashamed when you got up and found the book on the floor. You know, no. A steady diet of this will keep you healthy. Gibbon us. If a man were called to fix the period in the history of the world during which the condition of the human race was most happy and prosperous, he would without hesitation name that which elapsed from the death of Marcus Aurelius. The vast, and notice the kind of sarcastic tone that some might miss, the vast extent of the Roman Empire was governed by absolute power under the guidance of virtue and wisdom. I think there's more to this than might be open to the naked eye. He knew what he was saying, because even though everything about Rome fascinated this man, he was, by the way, an individual that we would call the elite of Britain. They were not nobility, but I would call them of the knightly class of the 18th century, sort of the pre-industrial society. His father had a great estate. He grew up, in other words, without looking for career paths, that sort of thing. Well, like my student, what can I do with a history major? You know, that never would have occurred to him, so vulgar a question as that. No. I mean, it was like he went to Rome, literally, in 18th century Rome, and he was transformed. The thought of how could all this be? Now, what was going on in 18th century Rome? Well, it was a papal city. Remember, when he was writing, it was still, this is before Italy. So there's no Italy, and Rome is controlled by the Pope. As far as Gibbon was concerned, this was a mixed blessing, because Gibbon had periods of being what I guess we would call a free thinker, to being an Anglican. Of course, his church was part of the establishment. And then at times, Catholic. So he had sort of a mixed up religious view, but that was all right, because in the heart of it all was the love and worship of Rome and what it had been. And of course, as he would write in his memoirs, he always wondered about what the relationship of Christianity was to Rome. And for him, it was not good. Not Christianity in its spiritual sense. He had no problem with that. It was, of course, Christianity in its institutional sense. Folks fighting. Like my grandmother said, polite people don't talk about religion and politics. Remember that? And he definitely thought that was the problem with the Christians, as we will see. Now, what else does he have to say? Because you say, gosh, is he not going to give us more? Yes. Yes, indeed. You can count on that. You'll be, I'm assuming you're insatiable, that you want more given. Now this, the rise of a city which swelled into an empire, may deserve as a singular prodigy the reflection of a philosophic mind. But the decline of Rome was the natural and inevitable effect of immoderate greatness. I mean, think about that. Well, you just keep on getting more and more. And then finally, you just have too much. Immoderate greatness. Prosperity ripened the principle of decay. The causes of destruction multiplied with the extent of conquest. The more, well, that's just the world. The more you get, the more problems you have. Because I always say, I'm not at all envious of the rich folks. Do you realize how hard it is to be rich? Okay. Now, I think you do. I think that, and I mean, can you imagine keeping up with all that money? Trouble. I mean, you know, we just try to get by day, but rich people have problems. And it's the same way with the Roman Empire. If you were some little old country and you didn't have all this, we were talking about the Jewish issue. I mean, that that's always something, if you're a leader, you have to worry about, those kinds of things. Now, how do you justify it? Well, of course you do by saying, well, that's why we are Romans and you're not, okay? I mean, often in Tacitus we read about the Roman general saying to the people who've been conquered, someday you'll thank us for this. You know, maybe not, but, you know, you'll be outfitted for togas, and we have Latin classes starting up, and, you know, all of these things. And why are we doing it? We're doing it for you. Sure, right now you're pouting, you're a little mopey. I know. You'll miss being independent, but then someday you'll thank us for all this. I mean, that's the nature, according to Gibbon, of what happened. They just kept on, and the more they have, the more troubling than it is. Depends on the area. If you think Hadrian was trying to calm it down by withdrawing from some of these areas, I'm sorry, but that still leaves a lot. Just because you don't have Mesopotamia or Armenia, there's still lots left. As soon as time or accident had removed the artificial supports, the stupendous fabric yielded to the pressure of its own weight. The story of its ruin is simple and obvious. And instead of inquiring why the Roman Empire was destroyed, we should rather be surprised it had subsisted so long. And of course, for him, that means going all the way to 1403 and the fall of Constantinople to the Turks. And that's why that's such an important year. And you think, I guess there couldn't be a 7th or 8th volume. No, 6 will do it. But that'll give you all the detail that you're going to need to get started in your pursuit of Roman historiography, because there is lots and lots of that. But for them, you see, what do all of us learn as school children? 476, the last Roman emperor. Might have run around the schoolyard with that. You know, you think, oh, everybody learns 476, end of the Roman Empire. But not for Gibbon. As long as there is the second Rome, Constantinople, we're going to have more volumes. There's a lot more to be said. And he would say it, believe me. Now, we are going to look at some ruins. This will seem like a tourist kind of narrative, but that's okay. I think enough of us have traveled and enjoyed this and don't realize, I think, that while it is interesting to see all that's in Rome, there is far more of the Roman world than is in the city. We were just talking about the Colosseum, and you will notice the date. There we are, right in the early period. And again, that whole, and this would fit in very well with Juvenal and the bread and circuses idea, the idea of a place where people could be entertained, and clearly you can see the tourists over there. So you know that this is one of the joys of the Roman Chamber of Commerce. I wonder, think about that Tower of London in London, how much they, thank goodness for America. We are such great tourists, and we'll go regardless. You know, beg, borrow, steal, we're going to get the money. Oh, this Pantheon, there's Agrippa. I promise. And I think that is so nice of those who actually built the building, which is later on, because they wanted to give credit to Agrippa. He was long gone, but he was the original constructor of the Pantheon, and so his name appears there. But just so you know that it was an accomplishment of the period of the 5 good emperors, and not the earlier time of Caesar Augustus. A lot of questions have come up about what its purpose was, that is, purpose of the Pantheon, and I assume we can safely think of this as being a place of worship. Pantheon clearly has to do with the worship of the gods, but not any particular one. How does this fit into Roman religion? Well, interestingly, and I think as we talk more about Roman religion, we will consider that. Nevertheless, it is definitely a product of the 5 good emperors, and again, well worth the price of admission. It's kind of like Westminster Abbey. I'm always afraid to ask folks how much it costs now, because it goes up. Believe me, inflationary trends live in tourist sites. Believe me, they continue to go up, but it is quite a beautiful place. Oh yeah, I think a lot of people, I just heard that. The idea of what it's like to be in a community and then suddenly, it ends, must be an incredible experience. And people have pointed out that there are actually markings, that there might have been elections, and people were writing things on walls to indicate their support for this candidate or that. Yeah, it's that kind of process that suddenly, thanks to the forces of nature, this whole world is brought to an end, this Pompeii and other cities surrounding, and thank goodness for archaeology. And do you know that this goes, as far as archaeology is concerned, goes all the way back to the late 18th century, including the Pope of that day, might I add. So I guess the contributions were coming in. I don't know if they were contributing for archaeological spots, but the Pope himself was very interested in these particular concerns. In any event, as with all archaeology, the projects continue on. So when you were there and seeing these, it is possible that new discoveries are being made. I don't mean anything revolutionary, but still something that would be of interest to those who like Roman history. 79, and remember Titus and his relief efforts. So even then, people were sponsoring relief efforts for whatever survivors there might have been. Now let's go to France. You see that not particularly attractive automobile, but you don't understand. Here is the sign for the highway, and I think this is interesting because Lyon and Narbonne are both going that way, and you assume that people who live in places like this go on with their normal lives, and they tolerate tourists who find this interesting. And this is, I'm sure, a city of a lot of economic activity. Nevertheless, most of us would know it because Nîmes was a major center of Roman civilization, way down south. And for those who have lived or stayed or visited in the southeast region of France, this may have been one of your stops. For an amphitheater, again, would have been part of having a Roman community there. And the people of that area, again, were probably, by Roman standards, part of their civilized population. Again, the question about rebellions and revolts, I think these folks were pretty much part, what shall I call them, Romanized. They had pretty well accepted it, and they were going to share part of their revenues with the Roman tax people, and they were more or less satisfied in their level of participation. They were not part, as far as I'm aware, of any revolt after Romanizing for centuries. This is a beautiful sight too, and I always say engineering and the Romans really do go together when you think of the aqueducts. And I picked out Nîmes again simply to illustrate how much of southern France contains these kinds of Roman sites. Because when you get up north in France, now you won't see all this, so don't even try. It's just down here as you're getting into that Mediterranean world around Marseille and so forth and so on, and you see these beautiful sites, and you think, my gosh, how could it have lasted? And again, this part of the world was the part that had been quote unquote civilized by the Romans, and that's to be borne in mind too. That places like what we call France were not civilized pre-Roman. The Romans conquered them, and the Romans forced them into adapting their civilization. Unlike the Hellenistic folks. Thank you, we already have civilization. A lot older than yours, I might add. Think of the Greeks and all the rest. They're not going to think, oh gosh, these Romans with all this fancy stuff, we need to bow and scrape. No, they don't. But it's a whole different matter from the peoples of the Gallic world, French. So that's a beautiful sight there in Nîmes. Oh, Bath. Yes, yes. Now you can just, this is a wonderful tourist site for so many reasons. I don't know how many. If you like 18th century novels and the stories of how the young men and women of the upper classes got together, their version of the dating websites, this is pretty much it. The stories of how Bath became, in, as I say, the 18th century, a great social center, may have some vague connection with our interest here. Because our interest here is the discovery, presumably by the Romans, although the Celts may have had some interest in it for just the discovery of the springs. But the Romans had the engineering knowledge in order that they could create these spas. And if you have been in them, you know that they are meant for the leisure class. Regular folks probably don't have a lot of time to kick back or chill in the vernacular. These are for people with a lot of free time who are willing to get into, as my grandmother would say, mischief. And there are social activities, not necessarily savory, often unsavory. And the baths, whether they are hot or cold, were extensive and are another feat of Roman civilization. Let's see. Ignore the statues because they were put up by the Victorians. Yuck. So we don't like that. Everything about Victoria, they were like, but that's tourist guide talk. Oh, and ignore the cathedral. that too is definitely, it's a, what would you say, a sign of a coming attraction, but it was definitely not part of the bath scene. The bath, though, is incredible. And do you think that the people who came after the Romans would say, wow, these cool baths, we need to bring in some engineering specialists and keep this going. This is a wonderful project. No. It's like people who come after, like Angles and Saxons, say, bathing, I don't think that's good for your skin anyway. So that's the end of the baths, and it will become basically covered over until, golly, you know, modern archaeology made, I mean, people were aware that that had been around, but it was not particularly a place of great use. Now, of course, thanks to archaeology and historical interest, Bath is booming. So the Chamber of Commerce will thank you for your visit. It's quite a lovely, lovely city, as you can see from the other. But I think Bath's one of the nicest places to go in Britain. This could, one of my favorites. Now, our dear lady, you all know her at the front. She is always so nice to us when we come in and leave. She is from Chester. She's a Chesterian, and I'm very excited because at first she said she was from Manchester. I said, you told me you were from Manchester. She said, well, I didn't know if you would know where Chester was. I said, shoot, yeah, I love Chester. Chester's a wonderful place. So I want to make that straight. She's a proud lady from Margaret, absolutely. And that's where Margaret hails from. And I said, now, do you spend time out there? And she gave me that look, yeah, tourists, yeah. Because I think Margaret, as being a native, probably accepts things like this, you know, the way that people do. But it is very, very interesting when you think about keeping the peace in Britain at the time of the Roman conquest of Britain, and all those fellas who were up there. And with all due respect to Margaret and her family, don't you think some of them would have found the weather a little unpleasant? Yeah, and fighting those mean old Celts, and you can't blame them. I mean, it's their country, but they say we're peacekeepers, and this is part of our Roman world, and you need to give way. And we're here to stay, and this is what has been done to preserve those sites that I find very, very interesting there at Chester. And what do we see? Yes, indeed. I think I can see them there. Yes, I can. I think I hear a bah because you cannot get away from them. Slightly careful. Oh, don't go too fast. You'll be sorry. It is absolutely, and notice when the photography comes about, yeah, this is the way it is all the time, day in, day out. If you see this, be thankful, okay? Because it's not going to come a lot, that beautiful day. I mean, we're talking dark, folks, dark. You better come happy. Because if you are a mood weather person, trouble is waiting for you up in that particular part. Just about finished. Love Hadrian's Wall, though. And it is hundreds of miles. Finally, lest we forget, Marcus Aurelius, the last of the 5 good emperors, and the one who made the mistake of saying, my kid, you're so wonderful. I want you to be emperor. Bad, bad mistake. This actor, who unfortunately is not with us, played the part in the Gladiator. And we'll talk about Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations as we come to that particular area. But he was a great actor, and he really did seem to fit this part well, as did the wretched son. And I kept reminding myself, it's only an act. He's not really like this. This, of course, 2000, and he loved to imagine he was Hercules or other characters. And he followed his father, Marcus Aurelius, and it definitely, if anybody needed to be told, was the end of the 5 good emperors period. And times they are going to get difficult, as we'll see next time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll meet you out in the lobby.
Okay, the lobby? Okay.
Who was killed that you said didn't really happen?
Who said what?
Who was killed that you said didn't really happen?
Oh, Domitian. Oh, yeah, you are.
Don't drop her.
Okay, she'll be back sometime tonight. Solid A, Mike.